Wow, it's been years since I've seen a Dwayne Johnson film. And well, as far as I can remember, much like M. Night Shyamalan, I do also have kind of like this, well, I wouldn't say love-hate relationship with Dwayne Johnson, but it's kind of like more like a pity liking to him mostly, but this was kind of initially. Mostly because the first couple of movies that he was in, I just didn't like. I don't, but it wasn't necessarily his fault. But I will mostly say that it was his choices of films that I didn't like. That is until I think I began to see some merit on his acting once I saw his skyscraper movie. And from this point, I think that other Dwayne Johnson movies kind of went up on my radar. And even up until now, when I went to see Jungle Cruise, which is based on the Disney ride that I regret to say that despite my 2 times that I went on Disneyland, I never been there. I never been to Jungle Cruise, and funny enough, people say that it's very popular. Maybe it just went up my radar. So I can't say I know that it's very popular, but unfortunately, I never went there. But I can say that it was kind of like a no surprise for me that Disney wanted to try out again on making a movie based on one of his theme parks, theme attractions. I mean, from Disneyland / Disney World. If I had to say, I will say that they did have some success with Pirates of the Caribbean. I remember that I still enjoyed them, even the bad ones. Well, maybe the last one wasn't that good enough, I don't remember. But then, of course, they hit really mediocre films like, what was it? The Country Bears, The Haunted House, Tomorrowland wasn't actually good, I'll say. So, these were really, really forgettable. Boy, speaking of the Pirates of the Caribbean, you can tell that from the trailer that this movie is gonna try to capture that same enthusiasm from that people had from the Pirates of the Caribbean. Apparently, that's what they're gonna do with every time they're gonna make a movie based on a theme park attraction. I can't imagine how they're gonna do it with It's a Small World movie adaptation. God forbid. But anyway, those are kind of like my initial thoughts on what I was expecting when I went to see Jungle Cruise. For the most part, I was a little bit optimistic because I'd rather have a movie like that than a freaking Disney live action reboot. The last time that I saw was Cruella, and if you people know me, I hated this film. And now, but this one, I feel like they tried to make a little bit more creative on what they were doing, considering the material, I'll say, but I'll get to that. And I'll say that now that I came out from watching the film, and I'm gladly say that I just came out finding the movie okay. I actually like it. It really felt like one of those old 90s adventure films that you were expecting. Not perfect on its execution, but decent enough to just sit for kind of like 2 hours and just enjoy the film while not taken too seriously. I will say that it's kind of like a little bit of kind of like an Indiana Jones wannabe for with a little touch of family-friendly self-control. But at the end, it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. I actually really came out enjoying this film, but that doesn't mean that I can give it perfect marks. I still have to watch it a little bit with the eyes of someone who is a little bit knowledgeable about it and gonna give it out my 2 cents of how it could be improving. But either way, let's go on with that ride. So anyway, like always, let's go with the plot synopsis. The movie takes place in 1916. It centers around this adventurous woman named Lily. She's played by Emily Blunt. She goes into adventures alongside her brother. What was his name? McGregor Houghton. He's played by Jack Whitehall, and both of them they go on an expedition to Brazil and to look for this legendary tree that sprouts petals, in which they name it Moonlight Tears. But anyway, these petals have the magical power to cure any disease, illness, or injury. It could heal any person from any disease in the world. So basically, this is something that is going to leave a lot of doctors unemployed. That's the first thing that came out into my mind. But you know what? Indiana Jones was looking for the Holy Grail that can also heal people. So adventurers have to find some miracle something, a miracle MacGuffin, whatever it is. So I accept that. But still, the more I thought about that plot synopsis, it made me remember what was it, the second Anacondas movie, the one with the blood orchid. So yeah, they go to Brazil and they meet and encounter this skipper named Frank. He's played by of course Dwayne Johnson. So they go to that expedition, and at the same time they have to make it in time before Germans get there. And these Germans are led by this guy played by Jesse Plemons. I think that was the name of that guy, who was basically the leader of he's the leader of this German army that he wants to get the pedal so he can bring Germany to victory, because of course it's 1916 and they're in battle and Germans are evil. Now that I think about it, every time when it's that era, it's always a German. I mean, I understand because of the time period and the things that has been done historically. Just saying. And there, it's a simple synopsis of that you should know about the movie. And I like that they kept it like that. At least for the sake of making kind of like a family-friendly adventure film. Or what I think I said before, kind of like a lighter version of an Indiana Jones film. Or I heard people that they're comparing it to the Mummy movie from the 90s. But now that I think about it, it's been a year since I have seen that film. But I do remember liking that film fine. Better than the Tom Cruise one. I have to say this. But anyway, the plot it was simple as that. But I gotta admit that the movie, little by little, it begins to put layers and layers and layers of plot devices in order to kind of give out some characterizations to the characters or the plot, just to kind of like a way to in which the more you go on, you kind of find new twists here and there, in which some of them comes a little bit inconsistent, I'll say, and some of them don't. Luckily, it doesn't get as messy as many other movies do. But this one is kind of comes off kind of like an adventure film that the more you go there, you're gonna find kind of like even bigger surprises. It's not exactly like giant surprises, but for me it was kind of like enough to go like with the what? Oh yeah, by the way, it also I forgot to mention that the movie also involved curses and conquistadors from the Spanish invasions time period. Because there's kind of like this backstory of that tree that it involves this conquistador named Aguirre, and he's played by Edgar Ramirez, which basically he went there looking for that tree until eventually he and his group of conquistadores they become trapped by a jungle curse. It doesn't specifically tell you too much details, but then you'll see later. And you might be saying, okay, what does this have to do with the movie? Well, because the Germans awakes them. Because apparently somehow he got the information that in order to wake these well, for the lack of better words, undead conquistadores, they're gonna how can I say, they have to stay in range from the river. By the way, I think that with my explanation, I bet that what is in your head. I bet that in your head is saying, something sounds familiar. You think that this sounds so familiar to Pirates of the Caribbean? Then you might be right, because even the conquistadores, they do like the cursed people from the Davy Jones crew, as well as combined with the pirates that are cursed by the cursed medallion from the first movie. So yeah, and so much that even the undead conquistadores, they're now hybrids of jungle animals, which is basically snakes. One of what is made with kind of like moss blades, and probably the coolest one in my opinion is the one that is technically a living honeycomb that can also have bees in it. It's basically Nicolas Cage's worst nightmare. And speaking of animals, we also I forgot to mention that the Dwayne Johnson character also has this pet jaguar, a CGI pet jaguar. And by the way, I'll get to that just later, because first of all, I think I detracted myself from the usual way I review, because there's some things that I just wanted to spout out before I forget them. When I was supposed to talk to you a little bit about the acting, in which, well, after 2 weeks of sitting with the awful acting of LeBron James and the so-so awkward acting from the M. Night Shyamalan film, I'm kind of glad that at least I found some really decent acting in this one. Honestly, it was actually pretty good for the film that it wanted to be. Dwayne Johnson, he might not be kind of like the best actor, but you can tell that he has lots of charisma, and it shows. You technically have, out of the character that they have with this guy, he pretty much has kind of like this love-hate relationship in which you're gonna, because the guy technically kind of keeps having secret. He's also shows that he's a little bit of a con man, but I kind of like a little bit in how neutral, likable, unlikable was Jack Sparrow in the Pirates of the Caribbean, minus the drunk part. He drinks, but he's not like drunk like this. And during the whole movie have him butting heads with the Emily Blunt character, because, well, Emily Blunt, I will say that she does a nice job. Although there's some polishing that I will need. I think they should need with this character in order to feel, well, a little bit more, well, let's say, I wouldn't say physically vulnerable, but more like emotionally vulnerable, because for the most part, I found this character a little bit of a know-it-all. And honestly, I'm not kind of like a fan of these kind of characters. Although it wasn't pretty bad. They just wanted to make her kind of like this character who doesn't want to go into the norm of what society was during that time, and especially because the movie keeps hammering into your head that oh my gosh, she's a woman with pants and she's doing expedition, because of this is why she's not looked very well into the society of these this obnoxious, pompous British society. I know that they wanted to hammer on your head these kind of things, but you know what? At least this movie has an excuse, because it takes place in the 1916. Although I'm glad that, well, the hammering doesn't feel like an accusatory finger, but at least. One thing that I will say about that, what the character needed a little bit of a polish, is that the movie kind of lost an opportunity to have this character kind of learn a really, really harsh lesson. I'm not going to exactly reveal what it is, but I think this character needed to lose something in order to gain something. And if we could have learned a little bit more of that character's past, maybe it could have helped the movie, but maybe they're too confident that they're going to have a sequel out of it in order to have that. But again, sometimes these things are, when you are going with a first movie, it's always recommendable that you have to go with the intentions that you're not going to get a sequel. But this is a recommendation, not something like that. But continuing on, we also have the Jack Whitehall character, in which I like kind of like the dynamic inverted personality between him and his sister, because while his sister is more adventurous and dominant, the other one he's kind of like a prince. Kind of a little bit like a prissy, let's say. There was even a moment in which kind of reminded me of he's kind of like the male version of Princess Vespa from Spaceballs. That's the best way I can describe this guy. And well, he's mostly kind of like the comic relief. That's basically all I'll say. Some of his jokes kind of land, sometimes they don't. But overall, I still like that they even give him kind of like a backstory of why he's so loyal to his sister and why he follows her. I like that he tried to make it to have some kind of friendship with the Dwayne Johnson character. So he comes off as despite being a comic relief, at least he comes off at least as a character, not just kind of like just someone that you just want to punch him or something like that. I like that. On the other hand, there's also kind of like the villain. My God, he's Kirk. The German is cartoonish. Let's say that for a World War I soldier, he is every bit of a World War I cartoon character. With the mustache, a little bit the way he talks, the way sometimes he acts, and almost at the second half of the movie when he reappears, my God, how come? Let's say that he comes from one wardrobe that comes okay, and then he comes out dressing up like he wants to participate in the Nutcracker suit. That's the best way I can say that. Oh my God, why you're wearing something so bright? All right, technical aspects that I want to talk about this movie. There's some. The pacing sometimes it goes either fast or it goes slow when it's about the storytelling. A lot of the aspect is kind of like the usual adventure chase scene or an adventure banter. Sometimes, I'll say that sometimes the banter kind of drags on a little bit, but luckily the movie it does a kind of like a nice job in order to keep you mildly entertained, not perfectly entertained. What else I can... the camera work is fine, although I do have to say that there are moments in which some of the camera, the editing and the action feels a little bit too close, which is something that I notice in a lot of action films. I heard that the movie Snake Eyes didn't had horrible camera work in the action scenes. I'm not gonna go so much into that, but at least I'll give out the 2 cents that yeah, shaky camera doesn't work. And by the way, I say that because I never saw the Snake Eyes movie. It didn't caught my attention to watch it. This is why you're not gonna see me talk about Snake Eyes. Another technical aspect that I do have to say, the colors are fine. I like the shadowing effects that they do. What else there is about kind of like the camera work? I already talked to you about some of the pacing, and I think that it's time for me to talk about probably one of the biggest mixed feelings that I have with this movie, which is the CGI, because my God. I can't say that is one of the worst CGI movies there is, but I can say that it's probably one of the clumsiest use of CGI in this movie. This is me talking from someone who saw Space Jam: A New Legacy, which is oversaturation of CGI. This one, I think that this could have done a lot of benefit with if they could have used more practical effects more than CGI. Oh yeah, there are some practical effects, but the CGI, if you have a little bit of an designer eyes, you're gonna notice a lot, kind of like very distracting blunders. And the best example you can see it is most of the animals. A lot of the animals are CGI, but the worst one is unfortunately the Jaguar. The character Dwayne Johnson, he befriends this Jaguar that is basically his pet. But every time I see this Jaguar, I kept getting distracted by saying, "My God, this Jaguar looks so fake. It's really fake." I will say that this Jaguar probably looks worse than than the CGI Looney Tunes. I mean, they're worse, but it's so distracting considering that we also get CGI snakes, which always crawls my skin. The CGI snakes doesn't look as good as the Jaguar. A lot of the animals, they look really kind of like bad CGI. And by the way, when I mean bad CGI, I don't mean that they're not well done or something like that. Because I know that animators have had a hard time, you know, trying to make these creatures. But the problem that I found is that when I mean bad CGI, I mean the way they blend into the movie. And for a movie with live actors, they don't seem to blend very well. They don't. I find them really fake, and this distracts me and detaches me from the movie. So much that this is one of the few moments in which I think that practical effects could have been the better deal, no matter the limitations that practical effects does. So this is kind of like one of my biggest gripes that I have more in the technicalities of this film. Okay, now some stray observations that I have with this movie. One thing is that while I never been to the Jungle Cruise in Disneyland or Disney World, I did hear stories about this ride. And funnily enough is that after the initial 5 minutes of the movie, then we get kind of like the other 5 minutes of Dwayne Johnson being the skipper and / the ferryman of a group of tourists, and all this scene is basically doing the Jungle Cruise trip. Which, you know, with saying, hey, look at this, look at the hippopotamus or something like that. It really felt like it really paid homage to the ride. People have told me that one of the cringiest things that the real Jungle Cruise has is that the narrator has a lot of bad puns and everything. Boy, that in this case, Dwayne Johnson was doing a lot of bad puns, and even the tourists were like going like, "Are you serious, dude?" Oh my god! During that time, I was like, Dwayne, you say one more pun. You say one more pun, really bad pun. I'm gonna drop you to the overboard and make you, and hopefully you're gonna get chewed by a hippopotamus. No, I don't want that to Dwayne Johnson. He's likable. I was just joking, but still, it was like that's the funny. I would say that the puns were so cringy that it was kind of hilarious. So much that, you know what? If they decided to remodel again the Jungle Cruise, please have Dwayne Johnson do the lines. that would be great. Another thing that I do have to say is that, yeah, like always, the movie does feel like those adventure films that you've seen kind of like in the 90s. But you're gonna, like I said, you're gonna have a lot of comparisons to what was it? Pirates of the Caribbean, The Mummy, Indiana Jones. For me, and the second Anaconda's film. Another thing that I have, but I do have to say that while I wasn't digging too much into the lore or kind of like the quirkiness of between Emily Blunt and Dwayne Johnson and their quote-unquote fourth romance that they wanted to do. There comes a kind of like a twist with Dwayne Johnson. And I'm not gonna say here what it is, but the best I can say is that once that is revealed and Dwayne Johnson talks about his past, this is where I got hooked, because I absolutely really love that backstory. That backstory was awesome, and I love adventure films that they have kind of like this dark dark lore, or and I wouldn't. Or sometimes if it's Lovecraftian, the better. This one it's not Lovecraftian, but still, I can't imagine something as dark as it is, especially for a movie that they wanted to target, kind of like I'll say PG-13, kind of in the PG-13 version. I don't think that they wanted to target it to younger audiences, but more like a teen audience. But you know what? Little kids even know Indiana Jones, and Indiana Jones has people melting their faces off, or being burned into burned as a sacrifice, or people being decapitated while trying to get the Holy Grail. So why not? So yeah, I kind of love that. But I will also want to say is that one of the technical aspects that I didn't mention, but because I wanted to save it for this moment, is that there are some times in which the movie gets a little bit inconsistent in its storytelling. One thing, it has to do with Dwayne Johnson at the end, but since and the other one is that the movie, there's a kind of like a, remember that I said that there was a moment in which I would have loved if we have kind of like a consequence to the recklessness and the personality of the Emily Blunt character. Well, they kind of missed that chance when they have kind of like a character that breaks its leg. And then, no, he breaks his foot, he twisted it. And then this character, for the couple of scenes, it was like, yeah, he has to walk with a stick. But then later in the movie, he loses that. It's almost like the movie forgets that he got injured. And it's an injury that looks like it's gonna last for days. And as well, that there's also kind of like the Dwayne Johnson thing, in which it has to do with the backstory that, again, I will not reveal, but let's say that the only clue that I'll give you is that there is a consequence, but then at the end of the movie, that inconsistency was dropped because they wanted a happy ending. That's the only thing I'll say. But you know what? At least I will spoil you something that very minor by saying that at the end of the movie we ended up seeing Dwayne Johnson with kind of like dressed up like a Willy Wonka wannabe, minus the top hat. That's the best way I can describe that moment. Overall, Jungle Cruise. Do I recommend it? Well, it's a fun movie. I just came out enjoying it. Considering the myriad of Disney theme park movies that they've done, I will say that this one comes up kind of like as close as being as good as a Pirates of the Caribbean film. Maybe I'll put it kind of like between number 4 or number 2 for. I know that people don't like these Pirates of the Caribbean movies. I actually kind of like those. but definitely is much better than Tomorrowland, much better than Haunted Mansion, much better than the Countryside Bears. So this is kind of like this is kind of like a hit for me. I will say that check it out on movie theaters. Don't do it on Disney Plus, by the way. It's not worth kind of like an experience in Disney Plus. So there. Not much I have to say, and not much I have to say. I felt satisfied. I feel satisfied with the movie. I enjoy it for what it is, which is not exactly very common with me, since I'm very picky, especially a lot of the Disney live action films. But you know what? This is actually a cruise that is worth adventuring.